You're listening to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where dice hit the floor, paint gets spilled, and no game ever goes exactly as planned. I'm Grizzly, and here we dive headfirst into Warhammer, tabletop gaming, and the beautiful mess that is the hobby life. From epic crits to absolute disasters, we'll cover it all. So grab your minis, roll with me, and let's get reckless. Welcome back to Rolling Recklessly, the podcast where we dive into all things Warhammer Age of Sigmar, from the lore and epic battles to the hobby desk and the tabletop. I'm your host, Robert, aka Grizzly, and today we're picking up where we left off in episode 1.5. Last time, we explored the end times, the birth of the mortal realms. Well, today, we step into the Realmgate Wars, the first saga of the Age of Sigmar, where gods returned, heroes rose, and the mortal realms began to claw their way back from chaos. We'll talk about Stormcast's first thunderous strikes, the Battle of Ghyran that's especially close to my heart as a Sylvaneth player, and the epic sieges and betrayals that shape the foundations of the settings that we love today. This is where Age of Sigmar truly begins, the Realmgate Wars. The dawn of the Realmgate Wars. The Realmgate Wars begins with Sigmar finally unleashing his Stormcast Eternals upon the forces of chaos. This was the big reveal. The moment the golden-armored warriors descended from the heavens, striking the mortal realms like a living lightning bolt. Their first campaign was in Ghal, the realm of fire, where Vandus Hammerhand led the Hammers of Sigmar against Ghal and his Bloodbound. This wasn't for a military maneuver, it was a declaration. For centuries, chaos had reigned unopposed, mortals had been enslaved or slaughtered, and the realms themselves had been twisted by corruption. Now for the first time, a force stood that could challenge them. The arrival of the Stormcast was like hope cracking open from the sky. Imagining a mortal who had only ever known chaos' rule. Seeing that these towering warriors descend from the storm under thunder, wielding weapons that glowed with Sigmar's wrath, it wasn't just about killing coordinate warriors, it was about showing the world that chaos could bleed. The campaign was brutal. Ghal was a legendary warlord who commanded a vast tide of Bloodbound, and the Stormcast paid a high price in the reforgings. Vandus himself clashed with Ghal in duels that shook the battlefield. The Brimstone Peninsula became the proving grounds for Sigmar's experiment. Could these reforged heroes hold the line? And that answer was yes. Ghal was eventually cast down, his armies broken, and the Brimstone Peninsula marked the first victory for the Stormcast. This was true openings of the Realmgate Wars. Thunder strikes against the dark, and a promise that the mortal realms would never ever be the same again. As the lightning strikes spread, the Realmgate Wars expanded into every corner of the realms. In Ghyran, Nurgle's filth had overtaken the realm of life. The forest choked with rot, rivers ran black with slime, and even Alarielle, the Everqueen, had been reduced to despair. And when the Stormcast Eternals arrived to aid in the Sylvaneth, the battles that followed became some of the most iconic in the entire saga, and some of my favorites. The Sylvaneth waged war in the rotting forest, their spirits flickering like candles against a hurricane. But then came the defining moment. Alarielle's rebirth. She transformed into a war aspect, riding a massive Wardroth beetle, unleashing the fury of life itself against Nurgle's endless swarms. That moment wasn't just a turning point in Ghyran, it was a turning point for the Realmgate Wars themselves. Meanwhile, in Chamon, the realm of metal, the Stormcast embarked on the hunt for Ghal Maraz, Sigmar's lost hammer. During the end times, Sigmar had hurled it in desperation, and it was lost to the void of chaos. Now, hidden within the labyrinth of Eldritch Fortress, it was guarded by demons and twisted sorcery. The campaign to recover it was a gruesome slog, but when the hammer was finally reclaimed, it was more than just a weapon. It was the return of Sigmar's symbol of hope and divine might. And then there were the Allgates. These weren't just portals, they were lifelines connecting the realms. The campaigns for the Allgates were massive, sprawling wars, and each tied to a different mortal realm. In Ghyran, the realm of life, Alarielle and the Sylvaneth held back Nurgle's forces at the Genesis Gate. Buried deep within the ring of corruption, guarded by the Glockin, their breakthrough was allowed by the restoration of the realm of life. In Chamon, the realm of metal, the Mercurial Gate lay within the iron fortress known as the Ironholds. The Stormcast and the Fire Slayers tunneled their way in, opening a breach, only for Archaon himself to appear and halt them in a brutal confrontation. In Ghur, the realm of beast, the Maw Gate became a battlefield for a three-way clash. The Bloodbound pressed in, Stormcast fought their way through, and then Gordrakk and the Iron Jaw surged in, claiming that gate through sheer power, a bitter loss for Sigmar but denied to Chaos as well. In Aqshy, the realm of fire, the Brimfire Gate was hidden deep within the Brass Mountains. Guarded by the chained god beast Skarbrand, a strike force of prosecutors freed him, and chaos ensued as he wreaked havoc, until Sigmar's forces, bolstered by the Fireslayers, broke through the surrounding fortress. The gate remained in play, but with the burning question of allegiance still unanswered. But as victories came, so did betrayals. At first, Sigmar had counted on Nagash, the great necromancer, to stand beside him against chaos. Yet, true to his nature, Nagash abandoned the alliance, retreating into Shyish to pursue his own design. His betrayal fractured Order's unity before it even had a chance to solidify, and reminded Sigmar that even allies cannot always be trusted. The Realmgate Wars were no longer just about the Stormcast proving themselves. They were about reclaiming the realms, piece by piece, facing down corruption, chaos, and betrayal, while threading a fragile age of hope. Now that we've laid the foundations for the Realmgate Wars, let's zoom in on some figures who make this era unforgettable. Because with the battles were epic, the heroes and the villains give the story much more heart. First up, we have Vandus Hammerhand, the face of Sigmar's crusade. Every saga needs a champion, and for the Stormcast, that was Vandus Hammerhand. His clash with Korghos Khul at the Brimstone Peninsula wasn't just a duel, it was a symbol. Vandus embodied everything Sigmar wanted his Stormcast to represent: resilience, vengeance, and the light of Azir, breaking the chains of chaos. For many mortals, the sight of Vandus leading his golden warriors was proof that the gods hadn't abandoned them. Next we have Alarielle the Everqueen. From despair to wrath, on the other side, Alarielle's arc is one of the most moving in the whole saga. At first she retreated into despair, a fading goddess overwhelmed from Nurgle's corruption of Ghyran. But through the Sylvaneth's faith in the Stormcast intervention, she was reborn into her war aspect. Riding her massive Wardroth beetle, she became a spearhead of life's resurgence. If Vandus was a symbol of Sigmar's hope, Alarielle was the living embodiment of nature's wrath. Her rebirth remains one of the defining moments of the Realmgate Wars. After that we have Korghos Khul, the Butcher of Aqshy. But every hero needs a villain. Korghos Khul, Lord of the Gortide, was Khorne's chosen warlord in Aqshy. He bathed entire regions in blood to please his god. And his personal rivalry with Vandus Hammerhand turned into one of the cornerstones of the Realmgate Wars. Though he ultimately fell, Khul set the tone for Chaos's brutality. It wasn't just armies Sigmar was fighting, but fanatical champions who would rather see the realms burn than to submit. Next up after that we have is Nagash, the betrayer of Shyish. Of course we can't talk turning points without mentioning Nagash. At first, Sigmar counted on him as an ally in the war against Chaos, but true to his character, Nagash saw an opportunity in betrayal, and when the fight grew desperate, he withdrew his forces and turned inwards, preparing for his own rise in dominance in the realm of death. This betrayal fractured the alliance of Sigmar was trying to build and set the rest of the stage for future conflicts. Lord Celestin Gardas Steelsoul. This brings me to one of my favorite stories connected to this era, the Plague Garden. Gardas Steelsoul, a Stormcast hero, was captured by Nurgle and dragged into the Garden of Nurgle itself. His story of faith, resilience, and eventual rescue isn't just a standalone tale, it mirrors the themes of the Realmgate Wars. No matter how overwhelming corruption seemed, the Stormcast refused to bend. Gardas' journey proved that even in the heart of Nurgle's domain, hope could survive. Next up we have Torglud the Despised, also known as Tornis the Redeemed. Another fascinating character was Torglud, a Chaos champion of Nurgle. Once a noble defender of Ghyran, he was twisted by Nurgle into Torglud the Despised. But after his death at the hands of the Stormcast, Sigmar reforged him into Tornis the Redeemed, a Stormcast Eternal. His very existence became a living reminder that the thin line between corruption and salvation can always be crossed. After that we have Ionis Cryptborn, the Lord of Storms. Ionis Cryptborn, the Lord Relictor of the Stormcast, who became a key figure in the wars, known as the Lord of Storms, he carried the lightning of Sigmar wherever he went. Ionis was instrumental in many battles, wielding both faith and storm to purge chaos. His presence underscored that the Realmgate Wars weren't just about steel and sorcery, but about divine conviction. And last but not least, the big bad himself, Archaon the Ever-Chosen. Finally, we can get to Archaon. Even though he wasn't directly on the battlefield, his presence loomed like a storm on the horizon. Archaon was the architect of Chaos's grand strategy, manipulating events from the 8 points. While Kul fought Vandus, Nurgle contested Alarielle, and Archaon was ready to prepare for war. His role reminds us that the Realmgate Wars weren't the end, they were only the beginning. These characters and their decisions helped shape the mortal realms. Vandus proved that the Stormcast were more than myth. Alarielle's rebirth gave nature a voice of war, and Korghos Kul showed that the unrelenting brutality of chaos. Nagash's betrayal fractured unity in the Pantheon. Gardus' faith reminded everyone that the hope shines, even in Nurgle's garden. Tornus embodied redemption himself. Ionis carried the storm forward, and Archaon, he promised that the true fight was still to come. As the Realmgate Wars raged across Akshi, Ghyran, and Chamon, the conflict spilled into other realms, and with it came not just battles, but political fractures that would shape the mortal realms for centuries. The War in Shyish and Death's Betrayal. In the realm of Death, Shyish, the Stormcast launched a campaign to secure realm gates and fortresses. Believing they could rely on Nagash and his legions as allies against the Chaos, for a time, Death and Order fought side by side, pushing back demonic incursions and carving footholds in the Shadowed Lands. One of the most critical clashes came at the Gates of Sorrow, where Stormcast and Deathrattle legions united to try and wrench control of the realm gates from Chaos's grip. For a moment, it looked as though this uneasy alliance might truly turn the tide, but then came Nagash's betrayal. True to his nature, Nagash saw no reason to let Sigmar's crusade grow too strong. He ordered his forces to abandon the battle, retreating into his necropolises to fortify his own power. The Stormcast were left to bleed against Archaon's forces alone. The Gates of Sorrow remained in enemies' hands, and the survivors carried home not just scars, but the bitter truth. Death cannot be trusted to stand with the Order. This betrayal wasn't just tactical, it was political. It fractured the fragile trust Sigmar had been building among the pantheon of gods, proving that unity in the mortal realms was as dangerous as it was fleeting. The War in Thondia. Beast, Chaos, and Survival. Meanwhile, in Ghur, specifically in the primal lands of Thondia, the war took on a different tone. Thondia was never a place of stability. It's a realm of endless beast, predator, and prey locked in eternal conflict. When the Stormcast entered, they weren't just fighting chaos, they were fighting the land itself. The Allgate at the Maw-Gate became a central prize. Stormcast clashed with the Bloodbound in a brutal combat, fighting tooth and nail for every inch. Just when it seemed Sigmar's warriors might seize the gate, Gordrakk, the Fist of Gork, arrived at the head of the Ironjar's horde. The battlefield descended into chaos. Golden warriors, blood-crazed Khornates, and hulking orcs smashing through everything in sight. The result? Neither Sigmar nor Chaos could claim the Maw-Gate. Instead, Gordrakk stormed through with sheer brute force, ripping victory away from both sides. This moment cemented Gordrakk as more than just a rampaging orc warlord. It made him a true power player in the mortal realms. For Sigmar, it was a bitter lesson. Destruction was not a distraction, but a third great power that could upend the plans of the gods and generals alike. Political fractures and the cost of war. By this stage of the Realmgate Wars, it was clear that the conflict was more than just military victories. Each god and each faction had their own vision for the mortal realms. Sigmar wanted unity and civilization to rebuild. Nagash wanted dominance over death itself, even at the expense of its allies. Alarielle sought to heal the land and defend Ghyran above all else. Gordrakk and the orcs proved that destruction would always chart its own course. This made every victory bittersweet. Even as cities like Hammerhall began to rise and mortals found hope in the Stormcast, the seeds of mistrust, rivalry, and political tension were already planted. The Realmgate Wars weren't just about reclaiming the mortal realms from chaos, they were about deciding what kind of world would exist when the dust was settled. And at their climax, with Nagash's betrayal, Gordrakk's rise, and the looming threat of Archaon still holding the 8 points, it was clear this was only the beginning of a much, much larger storm. The Realmgate Wars were a crucible in which the Age of Sigmar was forged. For all the victories, losses, betrayals, and unexpected turns, what came out of them was a mortal realms forever changed. Cities reborn. One of the most visible legacies of the Realmgate Wars was the founding of the cities of Sigmar. With the Realmgate secured and chaos pushed back in the key regions, mortals were able to reclaim the land, begin rebuilding civilizations, Hammerhall, Greywater Fastness, Anvilgard, and more spring up as beacons of hope. These weren't just fortresses. They were living symbols that order could carve permanence into the world that had known nothing but chaos for centuries. But unity among the gods was never truly achieved. Sigmar fought tirelessly to reclaim the realms, but Nagash's betrayal and Shai's poisoned the trust. Alarielle fought fiercely for Ghyran, but cared little for the broader war beyond her borders. Tyrion and Teclis remained distant in Hysh, plotting their own return. Even Grungy, who had helped forge the Stormcast, eventually departed to pursue his own designs. The Pantheon was fractured, and the scars of those betrayed would echo for every future conflict. Another revelation was that destruction could not be ignored. Gordrakk's storming of the Maugate wasn't just an interruption, it was proof that the Oryx, Ogres, and other forces of destruction were more than background noise. They had the strength to derail wars between gods, and even in Gordrakk's case, the ambition to become a realm-shaping figure in his own right. The Realmgate Wars showed that destruction would always be the unpredictable third player in the great game of the mortal realms. And what of chaos? Even with the Stormcast victories, the Sigmar's thunder echoing across the skies, Archaon still sat at the nade points. His armies unbroken, his will undaunted. The Realmgate Wars proved chaos could be beaten in battles, but it also proved that chaos can never truly be destroyed. As long as mortals gave in to the rage, pride, despair, or excess, chaos would always endure. In the end, though, the Realmgate Wars were less about a final victory and more about a beginning. They gave mortals hope. They gave chaos a new rival. They fractured alliances. They set the stage for the constant push and pull of the Age of Sigmar that we know today. When you look back on it, the Realmgate Wars are the prologue to everything. The Wars of the Necroquake, Kragnos' return, the Rise of Morathi, and so much more. They reminded us that in the mortal realms, victory is never permanent. Every battle is just one chapter in an endless saga. And that brings us to the end of the Realmgate Wars. From the Stormcast's first strike at the Brimstone Peninsula, to Alarielle's rebirth in Ghyran, to the desperate sieges of the Allgates and the betrayals of Nagash. This was the saga that laid the foundation of the Age of Sigmar. A lot of what we talked about today comes from the Realmgate Wars campaign books published by Games Workshop, which are goldmine for narrative detail. The novel, Plague Garden by Josh Reynolds, is another standout, giving us a powerful glimpse into Nurgle's realm and the resilience of Garda's steel sword. If you want to dive deeper into these events, I definitely recommend checking out these sources. Looking ahead, the Realmgate Wars are just the beginning. The victories here gave Sigmar forces of a foothold, but the story of the mortal realms only grows more intense from here. Next, we'll step into the Age of Chaos's lingering shadow and start to explore what comes after. The rise of the cities of Sigmar, the Necroquake, the events that set the stage for the Broken Realm saga. Thank you for listening to Rolling Recklessly, and if you'd like to share your favorite moments of the Realmgate Wars, hit me up on Instagram at rolling_recklessly_podcast, or send me an email at rollingrecklesslypodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to feature your stories in a future episode. Also, don't forget, the Nurglings giveaway is still going on. Check out my Instagram for details on how to enter. Until next time, may your crits be high, your paint never dry, and your rolls ever reckless.